District of Conservation is sponsored by CFACT. To learn more about our sponsor, head over to cfact.org. Thank you so much for
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
listening. Welcome to District of Conservation. I am your host, Gabriella Hoffman. This podcast offers a sober examination into all things hunting, fishing, shooting sports, energy, environment, and the public policy surrounding it. And this podcast also specializes in original interviews that you won't hear elsewhere. Here's what I have for you today. Welcome to the program, Brianna Howard. She is a colleague of mine at Independent Women's Forum, handling our social media presence. And she also happens to have a background in energy, with her family being fully fledged in the industry in Pennsylvania. And she also happens to be a mayor when she's not doing her duties with us at IWF. Brianna, thank you for joining the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Gabby.
Why don't you introduce yourself to my listeners, please?
Yes, thanks for having me on. I'm so excited to talk with you today and talk with you more about what you and I both are very passionate about, which is energy. Like you said, I am the mayor here in Mount Jewett, Pennsylvania, where we're a small town, but we are a rich town in terms of our heritage and our culture, and we are an energy-focused town with lots of logging. We have natural gas, so we have lots of cultural sort of endeavors and business endeavors in our small little town here in northwestern Pennsylvania. So thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And you talked to me about wanting to speak more about these issues because this does concern your family and so many families in northwestern Pennsylvania, a region I've actually had the privilege of attending myself and seeing fracking for the first time. I worked with Cameron Energy, shadowed them with the Stewart family, and staffers like Tyler Martin, got to know them, had a really interesting experience. We saw bears, we went fishing, we got to see fracking in real time. And I think a lot of people who comment about energy or conservation really don't see the work that goes into powering the country. They don't understand that these folks have to, much like your family, have to be considerate of regulations. They want reasonable regulations. They don't want to be overregulated, but they will follow the regulations if they're reasonable. They have so much that they have to think in terms of their operation. They don't want things to go awry. They want to leave the environment better off than they found it. Why do you think, before we talk about your family's specific business, people have such a disconnect between what the energy industry does and the perception of the industry?
Yeah, I think you bring up so many good points, Gabby, of just the disconnect between when people turn the lights on, what that actually means, and then the work that's being done to actually extract and produce the energy that's needed to power this country. And so I think, when you think about the people in cities and how they use energy and versus here, in rural America, where we're actually producing the energy and extracting it from the ground and making the energy. We are people who we love the environment. We are outdoorsmen. We hunt, we fish, like you said. You're not going to find a more beautiful place on earth than right here where I live in McKean County, Pennsylvania, the heart of the Allegheny National Forest. I mean, these are people who have, been born and grew up outdoors. They love being outside. They love their work. They're passionate about what they do. And they're the stewards of the environment in a way that I think people don't realize because of what they've been told by a media narrative that paints this energy industry as something that is so bad. When in fact, I mean, every single person, whether or not you like it or not, is consuming energy one way or another. If you drive in a car, if you ride in a battery-powered car, unfortunately, you are consuming energy whether or not you think you are. I'm sorry, your Tesla the battery came from somewhere, right? So I just think the disconnect between what people understand about energy extraction and energy production and the matter of fact of every single thing you do comes from somewhere and is a byproduct of something else, and that is a fossil fuel.
Fossil fuels are very much still a key part of our electric grid. 80% of what we produce and consume is still coal, oil, and natural gas. It's really hard to transition away from that, no matter how much proponents of, let's say, net zero policies are, educating people or saying to people that this has to be done. It's really hard to disassociate ourselves with it. And also the secondary and tertiary, products that are produced from petroleum and coal, oil, and natural gas. We're very dependent on this. And if you're calling, my view is if you call for phasing out, from the energy side, it's going to have to trickle down to the byproducts as well. Is that something the industry always communicates or stresses to? Like, it's not just one element of the chain of production. It's also going to be the other kind of succeeding chains as well.
Yeah, it's so funny. I feel like that call, like the call for ending, extraction of oil. I saw a video today of a couple protesters in a museum somewhere in Europe, right? Probably Paris or some other city where, they have no problem with all their food and their trucking and their garbage being hauled away by massive trucks that that rely on, diesel fuel. But, the t-shirts that they had on were probably somewhere down the supply chain were a byproduct of crude oil. The glasses that the one man had on were somewhere down the line a byproduct of crude oil. So it's like if the woman had makeup on, all of the components that go into making all these little products in our lives, like the chapstick that we use. I just don't think people realize every single product. It's not just about the gas that you put in your car or the gas that you use to like physically, heat your home in the winter. It's so much more than that. All of the products that we use in our everyday lives, from cooking to cleaning to making ourselves look more beautiful with makeup, like they are all extracted from crude oil in some way, shape, or form, somewhere along the production process. So I think that honestly, the energy industry, and I honestly think this is why I'm so passionate about this, and I know that you are too, right? It's like we have to do a better job of communicating to the public why these issues matter. And it's not just so easy as saying, like, when you hear, leaders like AOC or whoever calling for, oh, we're just going to ban oil and gas. Like, that is such a silly thing to say when you live in an environment, in a world that is so reliant on these fossil fuels. Like, there's such a disconnect between what you're saying and what is an actual reality for normal, every single day people.
I did see the Just Stop Oil protests you were alluding to. They've done it in DC. I remember they basically put like the National Art Gallery in a standstill by defacing some art there. And I think it was London, England, you were alluding to. And yeah, it's funny. Like, their t-shirt was made from petroleum byproducts, the hair dye, makeup, all of that. And those portraits that they're defacing, they're ruining it. Or it's already been used.
What's the point of ruining history in pursuit of changing the future? Like, I mean, I understand trying to make a splash about something, right? I'm all about using your voice. But at the end of the day, like, you're not doing anything except making yourself look silly. If you want to come to the table and have a serious conversation about alternative energy sources, that is the best way forward for us. And I think, like, there are organizations that are doing that, and that's critical here. And I think even just having conversations with people who you disagree with about these issues, like, that's how you move forward. It's not about defacing art. It's not about protesting and disturbing people's lives. I mean, I've been in Europe and I've seen these protests too, of people just carrying like blank signs that say, stop oil now or end oil now. I'm like, what does that even really mean to you? Like, do you even know what that means? And for me, it's funny, right? Because I'm thinking, oh, well, back home, my brothers are actually out on the rig right now, like, working and making the energy for the, our town in Pennsylvania and, ultimately the whole country, which ultimately is the whole world, right? Like, these things all have an effect on another effect. But it just always is very ironic to me when I see those signs, because I'm like, if you really knew what that meant and how deeply layered like a call that you're making is, I think you would probably change your sign a little bit.
Right. And how are they going to be able to navigate and travel without it? Like, they can't fly. They don't have wings. Everything is going to take some sort of form of, oil and gas to transport. And even like to bicycle, like, you have to obviously like shine the chains, using petroleum products to make sure it's lubricated and easy to use.
It's funny when you think about the most global, like this young generation of people is like, they call themselves like global citizens of the world, yet they're the ones who are like very anti fossil fuel. But I'm like, oh, how are you going to, exert your globalism, if you will, when you hate oil and gas so much? What are you're just going to bike across the ocean? Like, that's not going to work out very well for you. So
it's impossible to do that. I mean, even by navigating by boat, you're still going to be using fuel. You can't power your boat by electricity. I don't know any boating manufacturer that does that or advocates for that currently. I don't think it's discussed quite yet. There may be some talks of electrifying boats, but it's still going to be powered by petroleum products as well. And speaking of your region, your hometown area, you wrote an op-ed about Edwin Drake, who was one of the key, I would say, individuals who helped with the oil discovery, or perhaps the preeminent oil discoverer figure in the region. That's where, and you could talk more about this, but your region is where oil was technically discovered. Am I correct?
Yes, yeah. So about an hour and a half or so, some change from where I'm at, is where oil was discovered. Yep. And I think I wrote this op-ed because I was very inspired by National Energy Appreciation Day, which Independent Women's Forum sort of sponsored and spearheaded amongst some other organizations and some coalition partners. But I was very inspired. And, as I mentioned, my brothers, my family, I'm a fifth generation part of a fifth generation energy producing family. And I'm very passionate about these issues because I see my brothers who work very hard. My dad works hard. I mean, I don't think my dad will ever retire, right? He loves his work. They come home dirty, right? They are out working all day. They leave at 5 a.m. They're home at 7 o'clock. They're home at 9 o'clock at night. Like, they're long days, and they work really hard. And I think that, Edwin Drake had a similar mentality of just working so hard for a mission that he wanted to accomplish. And I think he embodies that spirit of what it really meant to strike what they call black gold, right? It's something that changed the world forever. And so I was inspired by him to write that op-ed, and inspired by my family and all these men and women who really, they are kind of the unsung heroes of the energy industry. You don't hear about them a lot. They're not anything that you would ever see on TV, other than maybe on like Dirty Jobs with Mike Rowe, which Mike Rowe has done a good job, I think, of bringing the human side to this, all of showing how much the energy industry, and especially the oil and gas business, can really change people's lives. I mean, these are young guys and young gals who are just out of high school, who have a chance to have a career in something and provide for families in a way that, like, even me with a college degree, a master's degree, I mean, I'll never have the opportunity even to make that kind of financial gain in my life that some of these guys have. Like, I think it's super, super telling of how Mike Rowe has pulled back this like curtain on, I guess that's usually a negative connotation, but has shown a spotlight on like how awesome that industry has been for these guys in Oklahoma that he's talked with. But anyways, yeah, Edwin Drake, cool guy, cool story in Titusville, Pennsylvania. If you ever have the chance, Gabby, I'm going to make you come there and visit, and we're going to have an awesome time there, and you're going to see it. It's a very cool experience. Yeah. Very historically rich place.
When I was in the area, I don't think we had time to go to Titusville. I forget how close that was to Warren County, where we were with Cameron Energy. I don't recall how far. It was at least an hour and a half.
Yeah, it's about an hour. Yeah, it's a little bit. But, when you live up here in the middle of nowhere, every drive is nothing to you, right? We drive like an hour to go out to eat for dinner. So it's no big deal to us.
No, it's an endearing place. I think more Americans have to kind of get out of the cities and the suburbs and visit places like your hometown area and see how much they undervalue the contributions of people who have to work hard, get up at very early hours, work long hours, deal with very expensive, dangerous machinery to ensure that the lights stay on, your cars are powered, and everything else, in that kind of process too, or any type of mechanized form of work too, not just, energy production, but to see where the, let's say, pudding is made. I know there's another expression for that, but to see where kind of like, where the process is made, how it's done.
Exactly. Yeah. There's so much that I think these rural communities have to offer to lawmakers, especially, right? You think about every state, it's urban centers, typically the capital, right? And the people that are in that capital are making decisions on behalf of those in the rest of the state. And they don't even realize how their decisions have consequences for those in the rest of the state, right? I think New York City is the perfect example of this. I live very close to New York State, and, the actions of those in the capital have a direct impact on those who live around the state. And I think it's just a reflection of how out of touch lawmakers can become with people in their states. And I think here in Pennsylvania, we've seen firsthand, my family's business has been directly affected by bureaucrats who are unelected, who make a lot of decisions about the oil and gas industry that they don't know a lot about, right? Because they think they know best, but they don't. And it's actually putting people's lives and livelihoods and communities, ability to succeed on the line. So I think there's a lot to be said about what you're saying there, Gabby.
Yeah, I know. State capitals, definitely Albany is hostile to fracking. I've seen this with what the governor has put out, and also the gas stove bans. You know better than me in Pennsylvania, because we have seen, I don't know how much to read into Governor Shapiro's work yet, because he only was just elected. I know he probably did run on abolishing fracking. Maybe he's reconsidered. But you also are feeling probably the toll of what Department of Interior decisions are doing. and also I would say kind of decisions of probably you don't have Bureau of Land, maybe Forest Service. I would say more so would affect your state in particular, because more West is going to be impacted by BLM decisions. But your oil fields are more so impacted by policies concerning the USDA, because they handle all forestry decisions. I don't know if there have been crackdowns yet. I know there's like an orphaned well policy. I have to familiarize myself a little more with that, but they have talked about doing something, I guess, contra to what the Trump administration was doing, and penalizing producers more if they don't comply, I believe, with fulfilling their orphaned well kind of wishes. But so far, what has kind of been the impact of a new governor and then also Biden policies on producers like your family?
Yeah, I think it's interesting you talk about orphan well, because the orphan well program is something kind of like Democrats are all lining up behind, and to be honest, I don't know a ton about it either, because it's something like, it's a little bit more niche, right? You kind of have to like, it's something you seek out as producers, right? People who would do that work. I mean, my family's business is definitely seeking some of that work out, but I think it's kind of a telling thing, right? Like Democrats use this, and I would say like left-leaning lawmakers use this idea of like orphan wells as, oh, they're so scary, like they're so bad for the environment, it's terrifying, but like they've been around for hundreds of years and people haven't even really paid attention to them. But I think it's just an easy way for like lawmakers to look at a sort of a small-ish problem, right? I mean, it's not like a tiny problem, but I mean, these orphan wells, if you really wanted to take care of all these orphan wells, like there's just no, I mean, it would take so much money, so much manpower. There's just no way you could even handle the issue with the amount of money that they're putting aside for it, because it's just not, it's one of those things where it's like you're throwing money in an issue that doesn't necessarily produce something or change that much. But I will say, I think just a general sentiment about how the Biden administration has handled energy issues. I mean, you see his actions that are blatantly oil and gas from day one. He's been very honest about how his administration feels about oil and gas. I mean, I think they've flip-flopped a few times because of like world crises and things happening in Russia and Ukraine, and obviously now with Israel. Like, I think there's a lot at stake for the Biden administration when it comes to these issues, especially, with global oil prices and reserves and all that. But I just think that the sentiment from the White House to the American people about how the everyday worker feels and how they take these things away, right? Like when your leader basically makes a mockery and they diminish your work every single day, and that's the talking points that you hear from the press secretary and from these cabinet leaders. And lawmakers in general, like how does that feel as a worker, right? Like if I was working in this industry, right? I mean, my family does, and I feel that on their behalf, but how do you feel? I mean, you feel terrible when you know that your work is critical, right? You know that the energy that you produce, and this is the same across the board. I mean, anyone who is an essential worker, I mean, I think we use that word very loosely now in like a post-COVID world, but truly people who produce things, people who take care of your garbage, people who produce your energy, anything that you deem essential in this world that ensures you're able to live a normal lifestyle. Every day you wake up, you turn the lights on, you go to work, you come home, give your family food, go to bed, like turn the TV on. Those are very normal things. Anything that helps aid in those normal everyday activities, like those are the people that we have to thank for our ability to just live very normal, peaceful lives, right? And when you have a White House that's like, yeah, exactly. First world lives. Like, and when you have a White House that's attacking those men and women and not valuing their contributions to society, how do you think that those people are going to feel in those industries? And why I care so much about this, because I see how the actions of the White House and the actions of right out of Biden's mouth, right? Very anti-oil and gas, which I understand, right? He's speaking to his very left-leaning audience. But it's just out of touch, because those people all have iPhones. They all have, they all participate in certain activities that require energy.
They drive in very gas-guzzling cars and planes.
Yeah, exactly. They love to fly. They go see Taylor Swift. They go to concerts, right? Their mother, they call Taylor Swift's mother, is the number one air polluter in the world. So there has to be a line in the sand on these left-leaning people's hypocrisy.
Yeah, amazingly, Taylor Swift hasn't really been alarmist in environmental policies so much. Like, she talks about other issues because she knows like she needs to travel. So maybe she has limitations about her activism, but I haven't seen anything from her. Well, she knows it would be so hypocritical of her. I mean, like that would be like sheer hypocrisy if she said something about it. It's like Leonardo DiCaprio, like being so crazy about these issues. It's like, buddy, you know that you run in the circles of people who are completely
wasteful, like, and use so much energy. I'm pretty sure all of us here in little rural Pennsylvania are using like a fraction of the energy that you and your Hollywood buddies are using. So just maybe take a backseat here.
Yeah, it's really funny how disconnected they are from these decisions. And I remember when Biden was campaigning for office, the first thing he promised was, I will phase out or stop future oil projects, oil and gas projects. He said, yes, it's going to end. And we have seen the consequences of that. We've documented this at our Independent Women's Forum Center for Energy and Conservation. I remember, I think it was maybe last year when I was still a senior fellow, that we observed a 5% decrease in allotments of leases that would be active. So they're purposely putting restrictions, and they've also had fewer oil and gas leases offered. I think the lowest on record, more so out west and in the Gulf of Mexico, outer continental shelf as well. So they've had like maybe 3 to 5 leases offered. So it's like historically low. They're increasing the royalty rates to bid on leases and to have these different outposts to extract oil and gas as well. So they're purposely creating policies that makes it harder for people, let's say, who work on public lands and even on private lands like your family, putting different restrictions on and caps on what you guys can and cannot do. It's being felt all across the board, small, medium, large producers all across, the country. And until people see the consequences of these net zero pushes, we are seeing actually, let's say, offshore wind is suffering tremendously because there hasn't proven to be a market demand outside of Inflation Reduction Act subsidies, giving a boost to solar, wind, electric vehicles. When they're operating on their own, there's no interest and it's very expensive. And a lot of revelations are coming out for that. And with these more stable commodities like oil and gas and coal, even though people have really written off coal, it's still a very integral part of the grid, even globally too. I think coal is still the number one, if I'm not mistaken. I remember seeing it like 32% of the globe consumes oil or coal, excuse me. So it's still important here in the country, globally. And those are really stable commodities compared to a lot of these so-called renewables. Although nuclear, I think we could bet big on nuclear, not so much as a replacement right now, but it could be a good supplement until it can come off the grid and come to fruition and come online rather. But they're not giving nuclear a chance, which is a shame. That's the true 100% reliable baseload, 24/7 baseload, really doesn't use so much of land. But there's so much to talk about this and there's no stopping with this. But Brianna, if people want to learn more about your op-ed, your family's business, where would you like to direct them to, please?
I would love for them to check out iwf.org/CEC, which is our Center for Environment and Conservation, which is your center, Gabby, of course. I think there's so many endless resources there. Your writing is always so enlightening. I learn something every time I read some of your writing, and my op-ed is there as well. I'm on social media. I'm on B Howard 1776 on Twitter, if anyone wants to follow me. I feel like I talk about energy stuff there when I remember to. As a social media manager for IWF, I feel like I forget to post on my own Twitter sometimes, which I'm guilty of. But I definitely think that our CEC resources are the perfect place for all of these conversations, and also just very enlightening on topics that I feel like a lot of people aren't talking about, right? Like the ESG conversation, like these things. Like I'm really thankful for you, Gabby, that you are leading the way on these topics, because if we're not talking about them as policy people, as just consumers of information, as women, like these affect us as women in particular, right? Like I'm a single woman. I have my own home. Like I pay the bills here, right? No one else pays the bills. I have to worry about the gas prices at my house. So I think they impact us very directly in our own lives. So people should be paying attention. And I think that I'm really glad that you're leading the way on these conversations.
Yes. And originally I was working with Mandy, who we were sad to see leave, but we worked very closely together, and I'm continuing her work and even drawing attention to some of these kind of other ignored issues concerning wildlife, because everything impacts, your ability to recreate and to enjoy life because of all these energy sources, to get you to a national park, to have you fly to, a resort in the outskirts of someplace out west or somewhere in Florida, you go close to the beach. All of these decisions, they're interrelated. Energy consumption, energy use. It does play very well into conservation. It plays well into wildlife, plays into all these different issues. And we're going to try to highlight that more. I appreciate you coming on the podcast. You're phenomenal. You're very knowledgeable about your region, the energy industry there. And a great spokesman for your family and the families in Northwestern Pennsylvania, Brianna. And anytime you want to come back on, you're more than welcome to update my listeners about what's happening, because we will see, I think, some decisions handed down federally, at least, that would adversely affect your family and that region. But even more positively, I think I saw that Pennsylvania won't be in the regional greenhouse gas initiative for much longer. Virginia pulled out of that, and I believe your state did too, even with Democrat support as well, because that's a very flawed carbon market. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Gabby. I'm excited. We'll have to come back on and get into the weeds on some of these things. You teach me so much every time, so I will have to get into the weeds next time.
And your work is very appreciated. I appreciate you amplifying my stuff with the CEC. And as Brianna said, listen and follow our musings at CEC. Follow Brianna on social media. Get to know IWF even beyond our center. If you're curious, we're really hoping to reach more women. There are a lot of women who fish, hunt, work in energy, work in all these different areas. And we're hoping to broaden our reach and, have our impact be felt with you all, and work with women who are concerned about these spaces and want to preserve kind of the sanctity of energy and conservation. So Brianna, thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Gabby. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to District of Conservation. If you enjoyed what you heard today, go leave us some reviews on Apple and Spotify or wherever podcasts are played. Your feedback will help us reach more people, and I love to know what is on your mind after each episode. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to never miss a beat or a guest announcement, because that is our way of updating all of you listeners, and we have just hit 1,000 followers on Instagram for the podcast account. Thank you very much. And if you have any guest suggestions or topics you want to hear on the show, I am all ears. I would love to hear your feedback there. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for the next episode.